do. I think of also that new book that just came out that Chris Anderson wrote on, about stuff that's free, and I'll put that link in here too. And for Calcasa, we've long had a paradigm of for years and years of selling materials. That we produce materials, and I think that came from an economy that said you have to write materials, and then you have to print materials, and then you have to ship materials, and all of those things cost money. Right. And I think that for us, that's going to change, and that's going to change in the service of more people getting more stuff. That's going to change in the service of getting out a message, and for the fact that it will always cost to produce the materials, but it's not going to necessarily cost to distribute. And it's not necessarily going to, like the more stuff that's digital or print on demand or all those kinds of things, the better it gets. And so I think that that's going to be, in some ways, it's very much a throwback to all the things that we've always said about not-for-profits, about giving good things to people for nothing. At the same time, though, I think it's moving forward because it changes the paradigm around how we think about materials and how we think about information, and sort of letting go this idea that everything, like the revenue stream is selling items, or that you would do it that way. So I think there's opportunities.
One, you're also talking about what selling means. I mean, selling used to mean you buy the hard copy that we then ship, and you're talking about also selling things that are available without any of the paper products involved, which is another efficiency and access point. Another good way to rethink it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we're using, for these conversations, we're using YouTube as a distribution mechanism, and it's free. I could as easily process these pieces, and we use iTunes as a distribution point for a lot of our stuff in Prevent Connect. And there are people who subscribe to those things, and so instead of for our Prevention Connection project, we don't have paper items. You can't get a brochure about the Prevention Connection. It all exists online. Now, I think that's a mistake in part. Like, some people would actually like to have physical stuff, and we've had that conversation here in the office. But largely, it exists in a world where people download this stuff onto iPods and MP3 players, and in a place where people are checking RSS feeds and listservs, and Calcasa is moving to, our website's going to be entirely blog-based in the next couple months, which is going to be crazy dynamic, very, very fast, very fresh, easily searchable, and cheap. And that's Sacramento apparently on fire right now.
That's nice.
But those are the kinds of things where it's like, it is about technology, but it's also about free, and it's also about branding in a way that puts you in the heart of conversations, that I think creates other economic opportunities, other philosophical opportunities. And so all of that, in part, is due to the downturn. All of that is in part due to us having to sit and say, okay, how can we do this better? How can we do it differently? I think we would have gotten there eventually, but it certainly has gotten us there faster.
Well, and it's probably helping us get rid of a lot of things we didn't need along the way, right? That's the other thing, is the purging of things that aren't working for us or aren't the best use of our resources. And that is probably a great housekeeping thing sort of overall. I am also sorry that it's had to come through an economic debacle, and that so many people are suffering and losing their jobs and making really tough decisions.
Yes, absolutely.
And of course, we both know, and we're not ignoring at all the fact that there are very real staffing decisions people have had to make that are painful in this process.
Well, yeah, and we have.
It's about technology and resources. And so just as a given, you and I have had a lot of conversations about that along the way.
Being smart about
certainly is the paring down of unnecessary resources.
Absolutely. I mean, being smart about technology has not saved us enough money in the short term to have eliminated very hard staffing decisions we've had to make, or very hard program decisions. And it absolutely doesn't do that. My hope is, over the long haul, what it will do is allow us to retain the really key staffing that we have, and allow us to maximize the productivity of the staffing that we have. None of it replaces, and every manager in the country that is doing social service work, with limited exceptions, are making the hardest decisions of their careers, and the hardest decisions of their vocations. But if you stay there in that sort of like closed off place, or that shrinking place, you run the risk of sort of setting it on a path that it's never going to come back from. And I think that particularly for coalitions, it's a really dangerous message. that it's tough times, and so you're going to get less and be less and do less, because then as your organizational members are thinking, well, how am I going to scrape up the $100, $200, $500,000 that I pay for membership? How am I going to do that? And we've heard from our programs, our member programs, they scrape together the money to join. They scrape, like that they're using bake sale money, they're using, book sale money, they're using, individual little donations or things like that. And that is profoundly meaningful to us, not because $100 is going to pay for a program, but because we know that is, symbolic of their ownership of the coalition itself. And so for us to then turn around and say, you're right, and you're going to get like a ton less, is going to be a problem. We've had to tell them there are things they're not going to get. Like we've had to change the shape of like how we do our conference, how we do some of our other things. But we then try to balance that with, these are the other things you're going to get in lieu of that, or in addition.